productivity, winning strategies, and aligning employer-employee goals. If this sounds like something your business could use more of, then you've come to the right place. The Business Mechanic Show with your host, Vaughn Sigmund. Let Vaughn show you how to develop, improve, and jumpstart your business. So now, please welcome the host of The Business Mechanic, Vaughn Sigmund.
Welcome to the Business Mechanic Show. This is your host, Vaughn Sigmund, co-founder of Results-Driven Leadership, where we bring you the knowledge, skills, and tools that you need to become a highly effective manager. But no matter whether you've owned a business for years or just getting started, we can certainly help you out with everything you need to become a results-driven leader. Visit our website, rdltraining.com. for more information. And speaking of rdltraining.com, I've got two of my cohorts here, John Carl Walkie in Portland, Maine. Say hello, John.
Hey, folks, listeners, glad to have you here with us today and glad to be here.
As always, yeah. And Eric, say hello from Carlsbad.
Peace. Hello from Carlsbad, California. Glad to be here.
No mistake. So anyway, let's get into today's topic, which is one that Eric and I have been talking about. I put out a blog this past week on this topic. I think it's really important. I'm going to talk about the general topic, and then we're all three going to get down in the specifics of the title of this podcast, which is Watch Being Friends and Watch the Perceptions that you're creating with the relationships you have with your direct reports, peers, and even your boss sometimes. We all have a few experiential stories we're going to share with you, but it all falls under the importance in the fine line that we have to follow under authentic leadership. We have to be authentic, real, believable, trusted leaders. That's really important. Part of that trust and being respected is we have some level of relationship that's somewhat personal. We know some things about someone's personal life enough to where they know that we know that there's some important parts of their life that we should be aware of, and we want to be able to mention that, refer to that, especially when it comes to their personal goals. Maybe they want to own a home, have children, travel the world, whatever it is. We need to know those sort of things, but it's hard to draw the line. But with some of our stories and experiences, and I've got some horrible stories I'm going to tell on myself, but that's how sometimes we learn. And I think it's what's given me the right to share some of the things I share with everybody on this podcast every week. John, who knew me 40 years ago, you still know me today, right?
Oh, yeah.
A little bit. Knows the mistakes I made at 25. Eric, who we've traveled in similar circles for years, and working for the same organization for a number of those. He's got his stories that he can tell. And it's some of the warnings to look out for yourself, to make sure you're not making some of the mistakes based on being an authentic leader, crossing the line of leadership, friendly leadership, and some of the mistakes you want to avoid making to keep yourself respected, trusted, and growing in your role. First thing, let's get into this having friends at work. It's important to have people that we like at work, but there's also people we don't like at work. And then it's human nature for us to want to hang out more with the people we like versus the people we don't like so much. But whether we like them or don't like them, we still have to respect them. They have to respect us. Respect is earned, not created by a title. John and Eric, and I'm going to start with Eric. When you think about having friendly relationships at work, how and where would you draw some of the lines to be careful of?
It's a hard thing, knowing who I am and my high I and my DISC profile. I have a tendency to be extraordinarily enthusiastic with things I do. And it does gravitate to people, especially people that work with you as peers or even mentors. And I think there's a piece there that you have to understand who you are first. It's always most important, and know the pitfalls of being very exuberant with your fellow workers or people that work underneath you, especially. And I think that's the first phase. You have to make sure is you. With that, I think there's a thing there, and always listen to your peers and your other people when you hear stories or hear noises, I guess, in the backgrounds of things that might not be, as we would look at it, as correct or the right thing to do. And absolutely, for me, knowing who I am, there was nothing I would ever do something like that, to be doing something incorrectly or trying to get taken an advantage of somebody in some way. So I think knowing yourself and knowing your people and having your confidence that can give you the straight skinny on those things is always where I would start. Be my best thing to say.
So be willing to take feedback and trust that feedback if in fact someone is willing to give it to you.
Absolutely. It's foundational.
And John, in your mind, what are some of the things that being an authentic leader and then watching this line between becoming too friendly or familiar with somebody, what are some of the pitfalls that you would suggest you want to watch out for?
I'm going to say, piggyback on what Eric said, that authenticity, going back to the self-awareness. And what was the old Greek concept, know thyself? Okay. And I think I'll put a plug here for the DISC assessment, because I think understanding where you're coming from and how you portray yourself can really work into those perceptions. And I believe that you've always got to be aware of, I want to say treating everybody the same, because you're going to have to manage them differently based on their DISC personality. So knowing your audience is important. But in terms of the morals, the values, the principles that you manage your team from, you govern from, if you would, they need to be consistent. And that's not only for perception, but it's also from the standpoint of keeping your company safe, keeping yourself safe and the company safe, protecting those assets. Because again, we can put ourselves in situations that compromise us, or we're being considered to be, say, less than being equal in our treatment of people. And I think that if you do that, whether you have someone who, for whatever reason, your relationship is such that people believe that you're buddies outside of work, and that's Vaughn's friend. Okay. So whenever you make a decision concerning Eric because he's Vaughn's friend, people are going to look at that looking for something. And I think that that's counterproductive, because we really want everyone to be happy, treated fairly and equitably, but included the same. So it's not always just Vaughn and Eric talking. He's talking to John as well, and including people. So I think in the past, again, we all have people, as you mentioned, that we like, that we gravitate towards. And we might, I know I've been guilty of that in the past myself. There were people I was more comfortable with, and I spent more time with them. And again, maybe viewing it from a different perspective. Again, looking at that yourself from a mirror and seeing how you think you would be perceived. You say, I can get why people are thinking that. I'm not doing it overtly, but maybe unconsciously I am treating them a little different. So I think you got to be careful of that.
Control what you can control. Here's what I'm taking out of what you just shared, John, is we've got to manage perceptions.
Right.
And we can't control what other people think or the story they create, but we can control what we do to make sure that we're not setting somebody up to judge our behaviors in a way that can be misconstrued in a negative light. It's like being followed. I use this analogy, and I've used it for years with leaders. You got to imagine yourself being followed by a film crew, a documentary film crew, and you're always on camera. Everything you do, everything you say is being followed, tracked, recorded. And in that recording, those recordings being put into people's minds. And within those minds, there are a lot of powerful elements, one of which is confirmation bias. And that is, we certainly see a lot of confirmation bias in today's political world, right? It's got our country split in half in many ways, but it happens at work too, this confirmation bias. And how does that apply at work? They're filming you. They're going to take information. They're going to process and edit that film to fit whatever bias they're looking for. And if they think you're overly friendly with Caesar, and everything from there forward, they're looking to confirm, aha, yes, you see, he's got special relationships.
Right.
Caesar gets treated better than everybody else, whether it's the truth or not. But who needs that damn baggage to deal with everybody talking and chittering in the background, because that's the other thing you cannot control is what they're saying to each other. So you've got to make sure that you're putting into the film exactly what the editor or the director wants, which is the right behaviors, being careful of showing favoritism or too much time with somebody else. John, I can see you have something to say.
Now, I was going to say, and the thing is too, if Caesar really is a top performer and he produces, and when the time comes for promotions and Caesar earned that promotion, he deserved that promotion, he gets that promotion, there's going to be somebody in the peanut gallery who's going to be complaining and, grumbling that he got it because he was Vaughn's pal. And I think that's the thing that you want to always avoid, because again, in going back to your concept of they're going to create the narrative, whatever fits that narrative, right or wrong, whatever you do is going to fit that narrative. And again, you're going to be viewed poorly, and so will Caesar. But the other problem is the whole team isn't performing that. The morale isn't great. The job satisfaction with those folks isn't going to be great. And they're not focusing on ultimately the customer. They're focusing on this grapevine.
And all through an innocent relationship, completely unintended, but the repercussions of this perception being created so undermines your ability as a leader, undermines the respect people have for you. And you may be completely innocent, don't even know that you're doing it. That's where Eric's point of getting some feedback, listen to that feedback. But most importantly, it's being careful that whatever I'm putting out there, right, how are other people going to be judging or viewing this? What we say, what we do, who we do it with. Unprofessional language and unprofessional behavior is certainly very important to being an authentic leader, but we can get overly familiar with somebody, right? Get a little too friendly with somebody, use a term or use a word that, believe me, if the opportunity presents itself, they're going to use that word or what you said or did against you. That friendliness, I'm changing the subject likely, but this is another fair weather warning, that friendliness, if that person ever fails to perform or gets themselves in trouble, will never be reciprocated. They will turn on you like a pit bull on crack. It is over, buddy. And so believe me, we're painting a very dark picture here, but if you ever think that because we're friends, they're going to give you some latitude, you are wrong. Eric has got his hand raised, and I know he's got something to say.
Yeah, that will never happen. It's going to be worse than you could ever imagine, not to put it in a dark hole, but John mentioned repercussions of those type of entities, right? Those conversations and those relationships that may or may not be close, but they'll use those against you for sure, even though it may or may not have happened. That's just the way life works. So that's the thing where you have to control your narrative. You have to control your narrative. You control your brand. You control who you are, your brand that's going on. Like millennials always talk about, which is a fantastic group of folks that are interesting and innovative and
smart,
absolutely. And they pretty much brought to me the brand aspect of yourself and growing your brand out there. It's important to control that narrative in this avenue, because millennials usually, we like to, I say we because I'm almost a millennial, I think like a millennial, I should say. You work in groups of people and you do things in groups of people and create stuff as a group. You appreciate each other's avenues and what you're doing. And I just think there's a piece there that it's probably harder now than it used to be, more dictatorial. When you had a boss and this is what you did and you kept the line pretty clean. I think it's a bit more murky now, which makes it more difficult.
And to your point, this fabulous millennial generation, which is so creative, so innovative, and so different than what baby boomers like John and I have worked under. It's us that needs to adapt to them. They're in power now. They're in management now. They're controlling the world, not us old folks. And so for us to sit back as an ageist and think about the world needs to conform to us, I know the three of us, are way smarter than that, and we're way more flexible than that, but most aren't. And if you're an older generation manager listening to this, believe me, they're not going to change, my friend. You need to adapt and understand and embrace the greatness of the millennial and Gen Z generations, because there's greatness throughout. It's not what you did. No, it's not how you did it. No, but you can absolutely learn from that and guide that, because there's a ton of power there. And to the aspect of the group dynamics, there's, we were very much individuals in my generation, right? We were paid to make decisions and make things happen, and we weren't required so much to include others or work together collaboratively with folks. And you to know, and I've talked about it a lot, is this concept of collaborative management, which is so important, so impactful, not only as just being smart about leading people, but man, you've got a powerful generation or two that's with you, that if you can tap into all that knowledge and opinion and take feedback, be willing to be told that you're wrong or somebody disagrees with you, make a safe environment that people can say that. And we're getting a little off the main topic here, but I had to seize that moment. It's really important. And I make this point too, and John, I'm going to let you get your thought in. High D's are the world's worst collaborators. And we talk about DISC a lot on this podcast, this show. And as usual, at the very top of the show notes, if you have not taken a DISC assessment for yourself, please do it. It's free. The link is in the top of the show notes. Take that assessment. We'll send it to you for free. We'll have a complimentary one-on-one consultation with you to explain what this is saying and not saying. It's not a right or wrong. It's not a good or better or worse. It's just who you are. And it helps you identify who others are so that you can adapt yourself in ways that are going to be positive to the outcomes that you're trying to achieve as a leader or a manager. Take the DISC. It's free. It'd take you 15 minutes or so. And we'd love to be able to share that with you. So, John, before I took us off into a ditch, what were you trying to get
back on? One thing that Eric said, that the one word that resonated in my mind was the team. And I mentioned that my experience years ago with that one supervisor I had who only came in and talked to the manager. And you're always thinking, so my takeaway from that guy was every time he came in the store, Vaughn, I was thinking, he doesn't give a crap about anybody but himself and the manager. He doesn't care about us. So I think that was that takeaway. But Eric was also talking about the team. And the one thing we know about millennials, at least from my experience, is that those folks like to be involved. They like to be heard. Okay. And they'll have a question. They'll walk up and ask the CEO a question, which is great in my mind. But the other thing is doing things as a team. Not only is it smart because it resonates with your teammates these days, folks. So if you don't do that, if you just talk to the one person, you're missing a big opportunity. But working with a team is important for a number of reasons, because it's going to give them an opportunity to interface with you. And being part of a team is important to so many folks, especially our S members. But the other piece about that is it eliminates the perception that Eric only cares about Vaughn or Caesar. I guess it was Caesar. But anyways, but he only cares about that person, that they only, from either a professional aspect or a personal aspect, which can be really sticky. And it's always something that I was always kept in cognizant of, is don't put yourself in a position where people are going to start talking about you with this person for whatever reason. So you want to be thinking about that. So I think that from the standpoint of on the upside of that, group activity is a great opportunity for people to get noticed, to be heard, to be part of that whole synergy. But the other point, to protect yourself from the standpoint of being misconstrued, that perception that you only care about them for whatever reason. It could be a professional one, could be a personal one. You don't want to set the stage for that or make yourself vulnerable to that. Just counterproductive.
Well said, sir. Eric, I can see that you have something to share with it along those lines.
I really just wanted to say one word. Yes, John, or two. Yes, John. Preaching at the It's exactly head on, right on. Because I know John and I worked together for quite some time, and we've had many discussions about this aspect. I can't tell you how many years and years about this and how important it was for connection of folks that were, we'll call it younger than us, a different generation. And I think it was important for us to connect and collaborate. And it makes things more productive. Period.
And let's talk about some of the perceptions that can be created innocently. I'll tell a quick personal story. I had just taken over as director of stores, my first home office executive job. I was brand new to the city, brand new to the company. And within, I'm pretty sure it was, as I remembered, it was a number of years ago, but it was my first week or so with the company, and I was getting to know everybody. And there was this one administrative assistant who worked in another department. Came on, was very friendly, very outgoing. As obvious, she was a high eye on the disc. And she happened to also be very attractive. And she came over, was starting to talk to me on a regular basis, say hi, how was my day? And then she got a little deeper and asked me about some of the local restaurants. We were working in a small town, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, some local restaurants. And had you been here? Had you been there? And I think I made the comment along, wow, that I'd love to try that. And she said, well, let's go to lunch there today. And I said, okay, let's go to lunch there today. And she and I go to lunch together purely innocently. I had a great lunch, got to know each other a little bit. There was nothing. I was married, had 2 kids. I think she was married to a police officer, if I remember right, not somebody I want to screw with from a personal relationship. I was just being a nice guy. She was being a nice lady. A few days later, after the lunch, the director of HR comes to me, Mike Heydrich, and Mike comes to me and said, hey, Vaughn, can I talk to you? Which is never good coming from the HR guy. Vaughn, you and I need to talk. Oh, crap. Mike sits down with him. I was like, it's my first week. I'm already in trouble. And in fact, I was, because the chittering, the background had already started. That Vaughn and this young lady were having an affair. No possible way. And I was even warned by Mike, and her husband is a police officer. That's not somebody you want to rile up. And I'm like, hold on. I just went to have a good hamburger with her.
Yeah.
But that was one of those times that I just didn't think about the perception I was creating. Right. Innocent, just being a nice guy, just being Vaughn. And being Vaughn is dangerous because Vaughn's so friendly. And sometimes that can be misconstrued because I touch somebody on the shoulder, or I pat somebody on the back, or I hit them on the knee and tell them what a great job they're doing. And boy, it's just, you can't do that in today's world because that is likely to be misconstrued. And all I needed to do in my situation is invite one more person. Invite one more person, whether it's another female, another male. It's something that's innocent. And so the warning I'm putting out, please go to lunch with your peers, go to lunch with your direct reports from time to time. It's great to build that professional relationship, but include one other person so that nothing comes of that. And make sure you're balancing who you're going to lunch with. Don't keep going to lunch with the same person over and over, including your peer, because that can create some misunderstandings or misperceptions in itself. What are your thoughts on that, John?
Well, I was going to say that had you invited another admin to that, not only would it had quelled that, just squashed that whole thing about the affair, but also that person would have felt like $1 million because she was part, or she or he was part of the team. Then it wasn't about showing that preferential treatment to that one person. So I think that's an opportunity. If you look at it that way, not only is it just hedging that possibility of that negative aspect coming up, perception, but also it's an opportunity for team building on the other side. So you could take something that's potentially negative and build it into something that's positive and value adding.
If you couldn't do 3 people, Vaughn and John, if there's just you and one other person and you're in a work environment, small business, or it might be 15 people working there, and you're the boss of those 15 people, there's nothing wrong with going individually with somebody if it's a pattern and it's set and everyone knows, hey, this is my week with Eric to go to lunch. Absolutely. Let's do it. I think there's a piece there. If you have a plan, everyone knows what the plan is.
Yeah.
I think you're still golden. But the third person is, it's pretty golden rule. It's pretty much a golden rule.
Smart.
Yeah, agree so much. And it's, again, remember that documentary film crew is following you everywhere, and I cannot control the editing that goes on in other people's minds. And it's all the carefulness you have to, and I'm sorry to put this pressure on people. Isn't it too bad we have to do this, that we just can't be our natural selves? But once you take on and start wearing the hat, the name badge, get the title of being a leader or a manager, a lot of the nice things I would like to do go out the window, because now you're in a position that needs to earn respect. You're going to be judged. Everything you say, everything you do or don't do is being judged. And so you've got to be super careful. And it's, favoritism on the other side of this is that if you've got an underperformer, someone who's doing poorly, your team is watching and judging you. When's Vaughn going to do something about this? When's this going to be dealt with? When is management going to deal with this? And every day that you delay, you're making two huge mistakes. One, that problem is not going to fix itself. Never has, never will. And two, you're setting yourself up for that perception that, what are they ignoring? Why are they doing it? Is there something, and do they have pictures of Vaughn that Vaughn doesn't want to get out? What is it that Vaughn is showing favoritism? Because Vaughn holds me accountable. Vaughn doesn't let me get away with that stuff. And every day that you delay, they're creating their edits, and it's undermining your leadership all day, every day that this isn't dealt with. And you've got to have the courage, the courageousness to go fix it as early as possible. You want to make sure there's a pattern before you address it. Like I've talked in other podcasts, there needs to be a pattern. We don't jump on everybody for the first and only mistake they've ever made. But if it becomes a pattern, you have to deliver performance feedback, even if it's developmental. And I'm going to put a stat in here. Eric loves my stats.
I love them.
82% of the 5 million plus people that Gallup has surveyed report back that their boss does not give them developmental feedback. 82% report back that their boss does not give them developmental feedback. And when asked if they want it, they yearn for it. They want it. They know, especially our great millennial and Gen Z generations, they want that feedback. They're challenged by that. They want to get better. They want to acquire. They want to move further in life. And you as a manager not correcting bad behavior or preventing them from getting better. And so you're protecting yourself, right? I don't want to have a horrible, they're going to blow up, or I'm really uncomfortable with this conversation. In the meantime, you're screwing yourself because this person wants it. Now, please listen to the podcast, take the course on how to have a difficult conversation, how to deal with difficult people. There's a right way and a very wrong way to deal with it. You have to be trained to give developmental feedback, performance feedback, but you have to have the process and the courage to go give that feedback, or you're showing favoritism in the worst way possible. John, have you ever come across a situation, and I've got one that you will relate to, a situation where you just kept waiting on the performance to get better, that you just knew this person was worth more and had higher value and they were capable of more, and I just put it off, and finally they're going to get better. I just know they're going to get better.
Yeah.
And then that never happened.
I think there's two things going on. So yeah, you've got this in your heart of hearts, you want them to do better, and you're hoping it'll get better. I think the real reason is because you really don't want to face the situation because it ain't going to go well. So it's super easy to deliver good news and praise, but sometimes it's not so easy unless you do it the right way. But sometimes people aren't going to handle it no matter what, because they think they're doing a good job. I think the way to get ahead of that is by giving regular feedback. Because if Sally Mae thinks she's doing a great job and John thinks she's not doing very well, so John's going to go to Sally Mae and say, hey, listen, we need to have the talk. And she's going to blow up, because all this time I have never told her. And whose fault is that? So I got to say that whole piece about the regular constructive feedback, okay, useful feedback that's specific and timely. And again, it's not once a year when we do performance evaluations, folks. So those of you out there who work, especially in big corporations where you do the once a year performance evaluations, guess what? That doesn't cut the mustard. You got to be providing regular feedback, whether monthly would be great. If you're in the same office, you could do it more frequently than that, depending on how big your team is. But the whole piece is, by avoiding that feedback, that makes those conversations go a lot more difficult. In the one that I had, I had been avoiding the feedback. I didn't do it right, and shame on me. It was my fault. So that's something I walked away and said, I learned from that. I think that we all have to be striving to be better all the time. And that's something I walked away and said, that won't happen again, because again, I put myself in that position, and no, it didn't go well. Okay. So yeah, I was avoiding kicking the can down the road and hoping I didn't need to face it. It'll get better, so I won't have to deal with this because I haven't done my job.
Yeah. It's, if you give it regularly, it's fair, it's accurate. They're never going to blow up on you. It's never going to go wrong. In fact, I can count on one hand out of 40 plus years of managing people, that these conversations ever took a bad route out of thousands of them.
Yeah.
It's just being fair, being upfront, timely, as you mentioned. It's got to be accurate. And they appreciate the one. I can tell you the one time that I delayed it to the annual review, saved it up, and I dumped their poor performance. They got a non-performing, underperforming review. They were so pissed at me because, why didn't you tell me?
Well, I was going to say, the thing too with that is you got to believe, okay, because one of the things that I was going to say, one of the whole pieces of that authentic leadership was gaining trust, earning trust, but gaining trust and giving it back to them. And I think that when you do that, you totally erode the trust. Okay, so that trust factor is blown. It's gone. And I don't know, in my case, and again, that was the worst I ever did. And so I've got my mea culpa on that. But that trust was never gained again. So it's too bad, because I thought I liked the person. I did the person. I thought that they were a good associate and a nice person. But that trust was never. So that's what you're risking, managers out there, leaders. If you don't have regular feedback with folks, you're not going to have that trust factor when you end up having to deliver that bad news.
Yeah. And it's not bad news. It's actually good news, because now they've got something to go work on.
What they're mad at.
Yeah.
If
So how you deliver it, whether it's bad or not,
yeah.
Right?
If you're doing it all the time, though, it's not going to be, not going to be taken badly. It'll be taken as constructive. Number one, plus it's not something out of the ordinary. Eric is always giving me regular feedback, good and bad. It's not always bad. It's good and bad. It's measured, but he's doing it. It's not the one time. Everything's great until that one time, and he just kicks my ass. And that's.
And Eric, what do you say to the person that's listening to this podcast saying, okay, what John just said makes a ton of sense. I need to give people regular feedback, but once a month, come on, I don't have time to take an hour with everybody every month to do a review with them. What do you say to them?
I think fooey, I guess, is a word I would use. Fooey. It absolutely have to make that time. And the hour, I don't even see it as an hour. The closer and the more feedback that you give somebody, and maybe it's an hour the first time. The next month is 45 minutes. The next month is 30 minutes. The next month is 50. To me, it's 20 minutes, 15 minutes conversation. You build that trust. You're allowed to pivot on any kind of decisions you're having. If there's an issue, small issue, it allows you to go like this, snap. It's 15 minutes to 20 minutes. And it's such an easy conversation. It starts to happen where they give you the feedback of what they're doing. When that starts happening, it's just a nice conversation, and it's easy. Right. It's the way it should be.
Yep. They will always be harder if structured right. Take our performance management that works course, structured properly, done monthly, as John suggests. They are way harder on themselves than you'll ever be. And they know where they're coming up short, and they'll tell you. That takes all the load off of you, Mr. and Miss Manager, to have to deliver it. They already know it. You just have to be able to ask the right questions for them to tell you. Now, that's a very different conversation when they say, yeah, I suck at this.
That's right.
And I know I suck at this. Can you help me not be so sucky at this, Mr. and Miss Manager? Sure. Now we're building trust. Now we're building respect. Now we're helping somebody get better. They're going to appreciate the efforts you put into it rather than having something. Performance reviews are always or so often seen as adversarial environments, and they're not. They don't have to be. So there's this connotation and stigma attached to performance management that is not well defined. John, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say that, and to tell you just a story. Okay, so I'm not going to get too much into specifics, but my experience over performance management, and again over the years, and this is my personal experience, is for most of my career I worked in a corporate environment, and it was very much, I guess, run baby boomers coming up the old school, and we would have the once a year review. Okay, so I was with the company for over 30 years. And I remember we would go to the corporate office because we were all remote field people. And we would go to the corporate office to meet with our boss. And I remember this one time when we were all sitting, I don't know, I guess it was probably January or February, because we always did our review process. That was the time of year. And we're sitting in the corporate office, and we weren't in a waiting room, we were in a meeting room, but we all had appointments with the boss that day. So it was like round robin, like it'd be Vaughn first, then John would go and Eric would go. So people would go, they'd shuffle off to talk to the boss, the big boss, and then they'd come back, and you could tell by the look on their face whether it went well or they got a good raise. Yeah, they'd be grumbly or they'd be really happy. So it was a very, and to your point, Vaughn, adversarial. Yeah, it could be construed that way. But again, I think it went back to the fact that at the time we weren't getting that regular feedback. Now, I would say, and I'll give my former company big kudos for changing that process. So it went from the last couple, from being what it was in the past, where you'd write the review, and Eric could attest to this. We'd spend like a whole week just writing reviews. That's what I did for a whole week, and they'd be like 10 pages. My God, who could take all that? And we would deliver these reviews, and it was a whole process. It was not fun to either write them or to deliver or receive. It was no fun. And we went to a process that was really, I think it was like 3 questions. It was a 1-page, 3 questions. And it really started out by asking open-ended questions, which we all know on the Business Mechanic podcast are so important for a management tool. Tell me how, what, describe all those open-ended beginnings to get people talking, and ask the associate or the employee, if you would, to tell you how it's going. So I think that my former company was well on its way to going down that road of having them less formal, more casual conversations versus that adversarial, the boss behind the desk talking, delivering the news to the employee. So I think that, folks, Eric said it right. It's a conversation. It's a conversation about performance. It should be regular. And it doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be the behind closed doors all the time for an hour. It can be casual, and just walking up to someone and talking.
And to the topic we're speaking of, this just popped in my head, and it makes a ton of sense to me. Hopefully it does to you two as well. To avoid favoritism, the concept or the perception of favoritism, sometimes you've got to change. You've got a blind spot. You don't recognize someone's true performance if you're waiting a year to give them feedback, or you're not giving them regular performance developmental feedback. If you're doing it monthly, if you're committed yourself to a scheduled monthly conversation, you're using some KPIs as the barometer to how they're performing. You have a great discussion using open-ended questions, as John professes, and to get to the behaviors that are affecting those numbers. when you're doing that regularly, if you do have a blind spot, it's going to reveal itself to you. And believe me, others are going to finally figure out that you're holding everybody equally accountable, because now they've known this person's your favorite. Believe me, if you give this person a honest session of feedback and it stings a little bit, they're going to go tell everybody else, which is they become your messenger. They become a very good messenger for you. And then that perception starts getting altered, right? You start balancing what people are viewing and how they're processing their biases. And again, to avoid favoritism, give people feedback to help yourself understand where I need to be careful in having blind spots with the folks I work with, or my favorites. And listen, we have favorite kids, we have favorite pets, we have favorite places to eat, and we have favorite employees. And the favorite employees are generally the ones that are easiest to do business with. They do anything we ask them to do. They volunteer readily. And some people are like, kiss up. That person's such a kiss up. They kiss up to Vaughn. Look how Vaughn gives them all this special treatment because they're such a kiss up. Listen, they're just a good person. I wish everybody behaved that way. And the person who is not saying or getting what you're falling into is that person that's a little disagreeable, a little hard to deal with, someone that pushes back and needs for you to answer why and challenges everything you say. Those people are very hard to work with. They're very challenging to work with. And those are the ones that are going to be your biggest problem as employees when it comes to favoritism, because they're not being treated like everybody else, but they don't understand why they're being booked or not being taken to lunch or whatever, that they're not invited to happy hour or whatever the situation is. You go start having lunch with that person, you start giving that person the feedback. Go, listen, you're disagreeable. And I know that's your nature, but here's your DISC assessment. Let me show you the perceptions that people have, which is in the DISC assessment. And under stress, you do this, naturally you do that. You've got to manage these perceptions. And if you ever want to be more readily accepted as an individual, as part of your team or part of the organization, you might want to consider what you're doing to create your own perceptions. That person is going to love you for that, because nobody's ever told them that. They just think the rest of the world is against them. They're creating their own justification for why people mistreat them. And you can be the hero in this movie by simply not showing favoritism, not avoiding the conversation, talking with them, giving them that honest feedback that, to John's point, they already know. Eric's seen it used. We all three use that method for years and years. We know how well it works. It's just ask questions. They'll tell you, but you got to know the questions. And that's why
you got to listen. And you got to listen.
Oh my God. You're right.
They're telling you. You just have to hear them.
And that's the best leaders to that point, authentic, great. Everybody wants to follow and be a part of their team. Leaders are great listeners. That is one of the key probably top 2 or 3 elements that every highly effective, authentic leader possesses, is the ability to shut up and listen. Ask good questions, shut up and listen. Don't get in a rush. Don't treat this conversation as a task that you have to just do, that you have to be some level of empathetic and be willing to take their information. And Eric and I talked about this with a group this morning. Sometimes they just want to vent. You just need to let them vent. And the fact that you're just letting them blow off that steam fixes the problem.
It does.
You know, sometimes just hearing themselves talk dissipates. And it's an old saying, let loose in order to take hold. Just let them go. And then you're controlling the situation because they've realized where they're at. But they just need, how many times have we solved problems just by talking them through? And we had the solution, we just couldn't grasp it. But once we said it, with somebody that was patient and just listened to us, we could solve our own problem. Too many managers do not do that.
Yeah.
And they create all that additional work for themselves because they're putting out fires, putting out fires, putting out fires. In fact, 70% as surveyed, another stat for you, Eric,
Thank you.
70% as it's been studied, 70% of most managers' time is spent due to someone's underperformance. It's, I've got to get caught up. They didn't finish the project. I've got to do it for them. They're creating dissension amongst the team. I've got to write them up. I've got all these things that take up so much time and creates fires that we have to fight all day, every day, is due to underperformance, which in the end, we're showing them favoritism, but not giving them that feedback. Is the point again. Don't show false favoritism. And I'm going to tell you this story real quick about how valuable this is, John. You can remember her. You remember Suzanne Thoma in Clearwater?
I believe so.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And Suzanne's store, 188. I still remember her store number.
Yeah.
You were in 182. She was in 188. And selling 636s and 734s.
Yeah.
You remember those? 750s. So anyway, shut up. I'll cut that out of the podcast. But Suzanne Thoma was underperforming. The store was a crap hole. The numbers were not good. People were leaving her like crazy. And I, at the ripe old age of 24 or 25 years old, was trying to figure my way into fixing situations. And I, for whatever reason, held back my feedback for Suzanne. And it had just, I think, months and visit after visit, I go in, this place was dusty, it was dirty, things were out of place, business was bad. I sat Suzanne down and gave her the feedback in a respectful way. And son of a bitch, if Suzanne didn't fix it, it turned into a dollhouse. It turned into a model store. All somebody had to do, somebody named Vaughn had to do, her bosses tell her, you need to fix something. And my God, if Suzanne didn't fix it. But she wasn't ever going to fix it with my patience.
Yeah.
We need to wrap this thing up because the three of us could go on this for millennium, I'm sorry. But final words, Eric Van Doren, on the avoidance of favoritism and the perceptions that creates at work.
I think my final words is really leaders listen. I think that listen to your bosses, you listen to your peers, and you listen to your workforce. I think that will stop a majority of issues, is listening. It's the best way to do it. And then timely feedback.
Regular
Specific.
feedback.
Yeah, I think that is, I know it sounds very, I always do things in words and stuff, but I think that is exactly what you need to do. And understand, listen, there's always going to be people that are a bit better than other people. And we like to promote those people and spend our time with the people that are doing great things to make them better, and not the 70% of people where you're spending all that time with people who are underperforming. You want to spend the time with the people that are going to continue to grow your business and to retain those great people. So I think there's a piece there. Listening is really what a leader needs to do. That's my speak.
Thank you, Mr. Eric. Good words. How about you, John?
I don't think I can top that. I think Eric is spot on, but I'll just say this. You mentioned, Vaughn, that leaders spend an inappropriate amount of time on putting fires out. And I think that we had a couple of fires we talked about. And number one was the last one was the associate performance that was bad and having to fix that because we failed to give feedback. And again, we beat that to death, but I really believe you've got to do that. I think I heard the other one is avoiding the perception of mistreat or treatment, of unequal treatment. Okay. And whether that's giving someone favors because they're professional performance or who they are, because you like them, or maybe you have other thoughts. We want to be purposeful and thoughtful in how we interact and how we interface with our employees, including people whenever we can, because that's an opportunity. Okay. Not only is it avoiding a bad perception, but it's an opportunity to build the team. And the last thing I wanted to say too, is we talked a lot about listening, because a lot of our leaders out there, including some of us on the call, are D's, and we fail to listen. So I think I heard a really cool podcast a couple of weeks ago that was called, "If You Want to Succeed, Lead with Your Ears." But again, listen to the feedback that's, and even what's said and unsaid with your employees about how they're perceiving you, but also listen to those guys. Give your employees an opportunity, to use your words, Vaughn, to let the steam off, because that can avoid a blow up, which again is another place where you have a fire to put out. So you want to be thoughtful in how you manage things. You want to, while you can't be that videotape recording yourself, you can use that mirror. Look in the mirror, guys. When you wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and who you are, how you're perceived already with your disc profile, because we know you're going to take that, how you're likely to be perceived. But take a look at how you're interfacing with your team, and what would you think if you were one of those teammates that wasn't included or treated differently? So that's my takeaway. And I think it's all about that. Know thyself.
Know thyself and how that film crew is recording you. Well said, both of you. Thank you, gentlemen. John, as you were talking, I'm going to throw this in. If somebody's listening this deep into the podcast, thank you. I'm going to offer you a special deal. If you want to take our course on how to deal with difficult people, one of our most popular courses, it is my most downloaded podcast. Everything that has difficult people in the title is very popular. I know there's a lot of people out there that are suffering or afraid or holding themselves back from giving feedback to someone who they deem difficult. We can teach you how to deal with these difficult people. Take our course. I want to give it to you half price, well, almost half price, $97 regular price, $47. Pay $47 to learn how to deal with difficult people. Over 100,000 people have listened to that podcast. I know that you, if you're willing to spend $47, apply what you learn from there, you're going to get much more comfortable. You're going to have confidence. You'll now have the ability to go have difficult conversations with difficult people and turn the tide on the performance of your team and avoid the perception of favoritism and not holding people accountable. So with that, I'll put a link in the show. Get your DISC profile, find out what you are on the DISC scale, take yourself a course on how to deal with difficult people for only $47. Thank you all for listening. Eric and John, thank you both for being with me today. I love your support and I love your work. So glad to have such an awesome team working with me. I'm so lucky to have you. And we will talk to you all next week.
See you.